The wind screamed through the streets like a ghost that refused to rest. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, swallowing the city in silence. Streetlights flickered weakly, their glow fighting against the endless white. It was the kind of night that could freeze hope itself, a night when even the strongest would hurry home to warmth and safety. But for Maya, there was no home to run to. A small figure stumbled down the deserted sidewalk, her bare feet leaving faint traces of red against the snow. The flakes clung to her short black curls, turning them silver white. Her dress, torn, thin, and soaked through, clung to her shivering body. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, yet her face carried the sadness of someone who had lived a lifetime of pain. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Mama said angels watch from above. Maybe one will see me tonight." Her voice cracked and disappeared into the wind. Just hours ago, she had been thrown out of the only place she knew, the small, broken foster home at the edge of town. The place that was supposed to protect her had turned into her nightmare. The people inside never called her by her name. To them, she was just that black girl, the one who didn't belong. Her foster mother's words still echoed in her ears like thunder. "You're useless. You're a curse. Get out, and don't you dare come back." The woman's hand had struck her across the face, sending her crashing to the floor. When Maya cried, the woman grabbed her coat and dragged her outside. The door slammed shut, leaving her alone under the freezing night sky. Now she wandered through the storm, clutching her tiny arms against her chest. Each breath came out as mist. Each step grew heavier. The snow beneath her was no longer soft. It was ice biting into her skin. Her body shook violently, but her mind refused to stop. She remembered her real mother's voice, gentle and warm, singing lullabies on quiet nights. "Close your eyes, my little one," her mother used to whisper. "And if the world ever grows too cold, just look for the stars. They'll lead you home." But there were no stars tonight. Only clouds. Only endless white. That Maya's vision began to blur. She looked around. Empty roads, closed stores, cars buried under snow. She called out weakly, "Help, please," but her words were swallowed by the wind. Nobody came. Nobody ever did. Her small body could take no more. She collapsed near an old park bench, her knees sinking into the snow. The cold crept through her skin, numbing her little fingers and toes. Tears froze on her cheeks. Her breathing slowed. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I tried to be strong." Her eyelids fluttered shut, her pulse fading. She thought she saw something, a light far away, moving through the snow. Maybe it was her mother. Maybe it was an angel. But she was too weak to know. The snow kept falling, covering her small body like a blanket, as if the earth itself tried to protect her from more pain. In that endless white silence, the world moved on. Cars drove by miles away. Lights shone in warm homes, and laughter echoed from families celebrating winter nights. And somewhere in that same city, fate was beginning to stir. Because miles down the road, a man who believed in nothing but money was about to take a turn. One that would lead him straight into the path of this dying little girl. That a night of ice and despair was about to become the night of miracles. But for now, Maya lay still, a fragile spark of life, waiting for her story to begin. The city glittered faintly under the blanket of snow, but for Ethan Cole, it was just another cold night. Another reminder that even beauty could feel empty. Inside his sleek black SUV, warmth filled the cabin, the faint sound of classical music humming in the background. Ethan sat in the back seat, his face lit by the glow of his phone screen. He was scrolling through business reports, deals, profits, numbers. Always numbers. That was his world. Ethan Cole wasn't just wealthy. He was untouchable. The media called him the Ice King, the billionaire who never smiled, never slowed down, and never cared for anyone beyond his empire. To him, emotions were weaknesses. Compassion was a distraction. He had built a fortune from nothing after losing his parents as a teenager. He had learned one rule early. The world doesn't give, it takes, unless you take first. Tonight, he was returning from a charity gala, an event filled with polished smiles, fake laughter, and promises of generosity. Ethan had sat through speeches about helping orphans, feeding the hungry, and saving the forgotten. But all he saw were people competing to show who could donate the most for applause. When a young woman at the event said, You can't understand the poor until you've been one of them. Ethan had smirked and walked away. Understand them? He didn't have time to understand feelings. He understood results. Now, as his car cut through the stormy streets, the driver, Marcus, gripped the wheel tightly. Snow whipped against the windshield, visibility dropping fast. Should we take the expressway, sir? Marcus asked. No. Take the parkway. It'll be faster. Ethan replied without looking up. The parkway was nearly deserted. Streetlights flickered in the storm's fury. Ethan leaned back, lost in thought. Outside, the world was silent, pure white chaos. Inside, his heart was even quieter. He stared out the window, watching the snow swirl. Somewhere deep inside, a strange feeling stirred, something he hadn't felt in years. Loneliness. But before he could name it, Marcus suddenly shouted, "Sir, look!" The SUV swerved slightly as Marcus slammed the brakes. Ethan's phone fell to the floor. What the hell, Marcus? Ethan snapped, annoyed. Marcus pointed out the windshield, his eyes wide. There's someone out there. I think it's a child. Ethan frowned, leaning forward. Through the foggy glass, he saw it. A small, still figure half buried in snow near a park bench. For a moment, he thought it might be a doll. But then, he saw movement. A faint twitch. A breath. Stop the car. Ethan ordered, already unbuckling. The cold hit him like a wall as he stepped out. Snow crunched under his shoes as he ran toward the figure. And there she was, Maya, her tiny frame curled up, her skin pale, her hair frozen with snow. Her little hand clutched the hem of her dress as if holding on to the last bit of life. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered, kneeling beside her. He gently turned her over, his heart pounding. Her pulse was weak. Her lips were blue. Without thinking, he took off his expensive wool coat and wrapped it around her small body. Hey, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice trembling. There was no response. Only the faintest breath, a fragile sign of life. "Hang on, little one. You're not dying tonight," he said, lifting her into his arms. The warmth of his coat barely helped. Her body was ice against his chest. He hurried back to the car, shouting, "Marcus, drive to St. Mary's Private Hospital. Now." The driver sped through the snow as Ethan held Maya close, his jaw tight, his mind racing. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the man with everything, felt powerless. The world outside blurred as he looked down at her small, bruised-faced eye. In that moment, something inside him cracked. The armor he had worn all his life. He whispered quietly, almost like a prayer, "Please, don't leave me before I can help you." The storm roared louder outside, but inside that car, a quiet miracle was beginning. The meeting of two souls, one broken by life, the other hardened by it. Neither knew it yet, but their destinies had just collided, and neither would ever be the same again. The hospital doors burst open as Ethan stormed inside, clutching the fragile little girl in his arms. The warmth of the lobby hit him like a wave, but Maya's body was still cold as stone. "Help! Somebody help her!" he shouted. Doctors and nurses rushed forward, wheeling out a gurney. One nurse gasped when she saw Maya's condition. Her skin was bluish, her lips nearly white. "She's hypothermic," the nurse cried. "We need to get her into the trauma room, now." Ethan laid her gently on the bed as they surrounded her with medical equipment. His heart pounded in his chest like a drum. He had faced boardrooms, billion-dollar crises, and lawsuits, but nothing terrified him like watching this child fight for her life. They inserted 4 lines, wrapped her in thermal blankets, and placed oxygen tubes in her nose. The beeping of machines filled the room, each sound sharp, each second an eternity. Temperatures dropping, one doctor said urgently. "Get the heater closer," another shouted. Ethan stood frozen, his hands trembling. For a man who had always been in control, he suddenly realized he was utterly helpless. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a doctor stepped back, exhaling deeply. "She's stabilized for now," he said, wiping his forehead. "But she's been through severe trauma. There are bruises on her back, arms, and shoulders. Some old, some new." Ethan's eyes darkened. He turned away, gripping the edge of a chair, his knuckles white. Who could do this to a child? He thought. Who could be this cruel? He stayed by her side all night. While nurses came and went, Ethan never moved. He watched the monitors beep, proof that she was still fighting. At one point, a nurse approached him quietly. Sir, you should get some rest. We'll take care of her. Ethan shook his head. I'm not leaving until she wakes up. The nurse smiled softly. You care about her? I don't even know her name. Ethan said, staring through the glass window. But no one deserves to be alone like that. Hours passed. The world outside turned quiet, the storm fading into a calm snowfall. Inside that sterile room, Ethan sat by the bed, his once polished shoes soaked, his coat still wrapped around her. And then, a small sound broke the silence to a faint whimper. A twitch of her hand. Ethan's eyes widened. He leaned closer. Hey, can you hear me? Maya's eyelashes fluttered. Slowly, she opened her eyes, dazed, weak, frightened. Her gaze wandered across the bright lights and strange faces until it settled on Ethan's. He forced a gentle smile. You're safe now. You're in the hospital. You're going to be okay. Her voice came out in a whisper, barely audible. Did I die? Ethan blinked, his throat tightening. No, sweetheart. You're alive. You're safe. She stared at him for a moment, her little lips trembling. Are you the angel Mama said would come for me? The words hit him harder than he expected. His chest ached, something deep inside cracking open. He didn't know how to answer. For so long, he'd thought angels were just myths, stories for the weak. But looking at this fragile child, he felt something he hadn't in years. Faith, he smiled softly. Maybe I am, he whispered. But maybe you're the one saving me. Tears welled in Maya's eyes. She blinked, exhausted, and drifted back to sleep. Ethan stayed there, his hand resting gently on hers. Outside, the snow had stopped. The night that had almost claimed her life had turned into a dawn that promised hope. As the first light of morning poured through the window, Ethan Cole, the billionaire who believed his heart was made of stone, realized something. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was destiny. The little girl he found in the snow wasn't just someone he saved. She was the reason his frozen soul had finally begun to thaw. The days following the storm passed slowly, wrapped in quiet hospital sounds. The rhythmic beeping of monitors, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes, the distant hum of machines that kept Maya alive and warm. Outside, the snow had melted into soft puddles, but inside Ethan Cole's heart, something new was beginning to take root. Compassion. Every morning, Ethan arrived early, carrying a cup of hot chocolate and a small smile for the girl who had somehow stolen his thoughts. Each day, she looked a little stronger, her cheeks pinker, her eyes brighter. But every now and then, when she thought no one was looking, her expression turned distant, haunted, as if shadows from her past still clung to her. One afternoon, when the nurses stepped out, Ethan sat beside her bed. How are you feeling today, Maya? He asked gently. She looked down at her small hands, fiddling with the blanket. Better, I think. Then, after a pause, she added softly, It doesn't hurt as much anymore. Ethan smiled, relieved. That's good. You're a brave little fighter. Her gaze drifted toward the window. Snowflakes were falling again, tiny and harmless this time. I don't like the snow, she whispered. It reminds me of that night. Ethan's chest tightened. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, he said quickly, but Maya shook her head. No, I want to. She took a deep breath, and her small voice trembled as she began. They used to hit me, my foster parents. She paused, clutching her blanket. They said I was bad, that nobody wanted a black girl like me. Sometimes, they'd lock me in the basement for hours. I was scared of the dark, but they didn't care. Ethan clenched his fists under the table, his jaw tightening. The thought of anyone hurting this child made his blood boil. When I tried to sing, they'd yell at me. When I laughed, they said it was too loud. Tears welled in her eyes. That night, they told me I wasn't worth the food I ate. They threw me out when it started snowing. Her voice broke. I thought maybe if I was quiet, they'd let me back in. But they didn't. For a long moment, the room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the heater. Ethan looked at her. This little girl who had known more pain in 8 years than most people did in a lifetime. And something inside him shifted forever. He reached across and took her small hand in his. Maya, listen to me, he said firmly. None of that was your fault. Do you hear me? You did nothing wrong. Those people, they were monsters. But I promise you, they'll never hurt you again. She looked up at him with big, tearful eyes. You promise? Ethan nodded. I swear it. From that day on, Ethan made it his mission to uncover everything about Maya's past. He called the foster care department, demanding answers. He hired lawyers to investigate her case. How could you let this happen? He roared over the phone. She was beaten and left to die? Where were you? The officials stumbled through excuses, lack of staff, too many cases, lost reports. But Ethan didn't want excuses. He wanted justice. He vowed then and there that Maya would never return to that life. Every evening, when he sat by her side, Maya began to smile again. Small smiles at first, but real ones. She'd tell him about her dreams, how she wanted to draw, to sing, to have a home that smelled like cookies and laughter. And as she talked, Ethan realized something painful and beautiful. She wasn't just healing. He was too. For the first time in years, he didn't think about business, money, or deals. He thought about her, a little girl who had walked out of a storm and somehow brought light back into his world. Weeks passed, and winter began to loosen its icy grip on the city. The hospital that once echoed with Maya's fragile cries now filled with her laughter. She had begun to heal, not only from her physical wounds, but from the ones no doctor could see. And right beside her through it all was Ethan Cole, the man who once believed he didn't have a heart to give. Every morning, he'd arrive before sunrise with a warm smile and a small breakfast tray. Pancakes with strawberries, hot chocolate with extra cream. Maya's favorites. When the doctors finally said she was well enough to leave, Maya's joy was mixed with fear. "Where will I go now?" she asked quietly, clutching the hospital blanket like a shield. Ethan knelt in front of her and said gently, "You'll come with me, if that's okay with you." Her eyes widened. "With you? In your big car?" He chuckled softly. "Yes, in my big car. And maybe in my big house too." That was the first time Ethan saw her truly smile. Wide, bright, and full of innocence. When they arrived at Ethan's mansion, Maya's jaw dropped. The gates opened slowly, revealing an enormous house surrounded by pine trees dusted with snow. The mansion that once felt cold and empty suddenly looked alive, as if it had been waiting for her. As the car stopped, Maya whispered, "It's like a castle." Ethan smiled. "Then that makes you the princess." He led her through the grand marble foyer, where chandeliers sparkled like stars. The servants watched curiously, unsure of what to make of the little girl clutching Ethan's hand. But Ethan's tone left no room for doubt when he said, "This is Maya. She's part of this home now." One of the maids, a kind elderly woman named Rosa, knelt beside Maya with a gentle smile. "Welcome, sweetheart. Would you like something to eat?" Maya nodded shyly. "Do you have cookies?" Everyone laughed softly, a sound the mansion hadn't heard in years. In the days that followed, the once silent house became filled with life. Maya explored every corner, the library, the garden, even the grand piano room. She loved sitting by the fireplace, sketching pictures with the art supplies Ethan bought her. She often drew snowflakes and angels, sometimes a man in a long coat. Her hero point one evening, she ran to Ethan holding a piece of paper. "Look, it's us." He took the drawing, a stick figure version of him holding her hand under falling snow. He felt a lump form in his throat. "You're quite the artist," he said softly. Maya giggled. "I made your hair too big." For the first time in years, Ethan laughed. A genuine, hearty laugh that surprised even him. But what touched him most was how Maya changed the atmosphere of his life. The boardrooms, the meetings, the money, none of it mattered the same way anymore. He found himself canceling trips, skipping conferences, just to be home in time to read her bedtime stories that night. He'd tuck her in and listen as she whispered prayers. "Thank you, God," she'd say, "for the man who found me in the snow." Ethan would pause at the door every time, his heart tightening, his eyes glistening. He didn't see himself as a hero, just a man who finally learned what it meant to care. Point one night, as she drifted off to sleep, Maya murmured softly, "Good night, Dad." Ethan froze. The word hung in the air like a warm light. He sat beside her, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "Good night, my little girl." That moment changed everything. For years, his mansion had been filled with luxury, but no laughter, wealth, but no warmth. But now, with a child's smile and a simple word, it had become a home. The billionaire who had once believed his heart was frozen had finally found something, or rather, someone, to melt it. Months passed, and winter had returned. But this time, it felt different. The same city that once swallowed Maya in cold and darkness now shimmered under gentle flakes that fell like feathers. The air was still crisp, but the chill no longer carried fear. Because this winter, Maya wasn't alone. The mansion that had once been silent now echoed with her laughter. Every morning, she ran through the long hallways with her sketchbook, her little feet pattering against the polished floors. Every evening, she and Ethan would sit by the fireplace, he with his laptop on the table, she with a blanket and a cup of hot cocoa. Life had changed in ways Ethan never imagined. The billionaire who once lived only for deals and deadlines now found joy in the small things. Maya's drawings pinned to the fridge, her soft singing in the bath, her sleepy head resting on his arm during late-night movies. But the biggest change of all came one snowy afternoon. Ethan had been pacing the living room for hours, waiting for a call. On the couch sat Maya, coloring quietly but watching him curiously. "Why are you nervous, Mr. Ethan?" she asked. Tilting her head, he smiled faintly. "Just waiting for some important news, sweetheart." Moments later, the phone rang. Ethan's heart skipped. He picked it up quickly. "Yes. Really? It's approved? Thank you. Thank you so much." When he hung up, his eyes were glassy. Maya watched, confused. "Is something wrong?" He knelt down in front of her, his voice trembling with emotion. "No, Maya. Everything's finally right." She blinked, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, an official document stamped and signed. "It's your adoption papers," he said softly. "You're mine now. Legally. Officially. You're my daughter." For a second, Maya didn't speak. Her eyes widened, her small hands trembling as she took the paper. Then, as the words sank in, tears spilled down her cheeks. "You mean, I have a real dad?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Yes, sweetheart. You do. And I couldn't be prouder." She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "I love you, Daddy." Ethan closed his eyes, holding her tight. "I love you too, Maya. More than anything in the world." Later that evening, they stepped outside together. The sky glowed soft gray, and snow was falling again, thick, peaceful, and endless. The same snow that had once nearly taken Maya's life now danced gently around her like a blessing. She stretched out her hands, catching flakes on her palms. "It's so pretty," she whispered. Ethan smiled, placing his coat around her shoulders. "You're not afraid of it anymore?" She shook her head. "No, because this time it's not cold. It feels warm like home." Ethan knelt beside her, his eyes glistening. "That's because you're not facing it alone anymore. You've got a family now, and you always will." Maya looked up at the sky, her breath forming soft clouds. "Mama used to tell me angels come when you need them most," she said. "I think she sent me mine." Ethan swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "And I think she sent me mine too." As they stood there in the quiet, the world around them seemed to slow. The snow sparkled under the streetlights, wrapping them in a glow that felt almost heavenly. For Maya, this snow was no longer a memory of pain. It was proof of miracles, and for Ethan, it was a reminder that true wealth wasn't found in gold or numbers. It was in love, compassion, and second chances. That night, inside their warm home, Maya drifted to sleep in her new room, walls covered with her drawings, a teddy bear in her arms. Ethan stood by her door, watching with a soft smile. He whispered, "Sleep well, my little angel." Outside, snow continued to fall, calm, gentle, endless, not as a storm of sorrow, but as a miracle of love. Because on that winter night long ago, a billionaire found a child in the snow, and in saving her life, he discovered the heart he thought he'd lost forever.